Almost a quarter of all jobs will be disrupted over the next 5 years. This is according to the World Economic Forum, or WEF's, latest Future of Jobs report, which predicts that AI will eliminate tens of millions of jobs. According to WEF chairman Klaus Schwab's top advisor, this will create a, quote, useless class of humans.
Now, there's a quote by Sebastian Junger in the book Tribe that rings true. He said, quote, "Humans don't mind hardship. In fact, they thrive on it. What they mind is not feeling necessary. Modern society has perfected the art of making people not feel necessary."
In case it wasn't clear enough, the WEF cares a lot about jobs, but not so much about the people that do them. This makes sense given that the organization's focus is to create economic growth at all costs, probably because it's the only thing that will keep this debt-driven fiat Ponzi scheme going. The WEF and its stakeholders are obsessed with technologies, such as AI and automation, that result in the average person losing power. At the same time, they actively decry technologies that result in the average person gaining power, such as actual cryptocurrencies.
Now, you might be wondering why this is happening. Well, I'll tell you. It's actually fairly simple. Take a look at this chart up on the screen from Ray Dalio, revealing the rise and fall of power structures. Dalio reveals 18 steps that go from a new order to a new order. And unfortunately, right now, most of the world, including the United States, are in stages 13 to 15.
The WEF's obsession with technology is ultimately because they know they do not have the physical manpower to control the population.
Here's them. Here are their enforcers. Here's us. Them, us. Them, us.
The elites are aware of these cyclical patterns. They know all about the approaching fourth turning of crisis, and the big secret is this. Knowledge of cycles gives you power to position yourself correctly. So they keep this knowledge hidden, leaving everyone else to think that we're facing the end of the world. But in reality, this isn't the end. It's the beginning of something new. History's shown us that the decline of the current world order necessitates a metamorphosis, a rebirth that brings forth new emergent systems.
That's where DAOs come in.
A decentralized autonomous organization.
DAOs love crypto because having digital money that can travel anywhere around the world means anyone can join your DAO. More importantly, crypto's transparency also means DAO members can see how many tokens everyone's getting, they can monitor who's voting for what, and can buy and sell their tokens with ease.
Now, when people are given no other option, when their back's against the wall, they're going to seek out alternatives. So what kind of alternatives am I talking about? Well, I continue to pound the table on the parallel economy. It's the greatest opportunity for investors and entrepreneurs, and it's our way for freedom. So alternatives like alternative money.
And hence was Dash's more sophisticated DAO born in August of 2015. Dash's block reward is divvied up into 3 parts. 45% goes to its miners, another 45% goes to its masternodes, and 10% is set aside to hire its own developers, marketers, researchers, administrators, auditors, and anyone else the network might deem worthy to hire at some point in the future.
There's a seed of a true revolution here, one that could upend the way we work, just as crypto might revolutionize our financial system. After all, millions more people are working remotely now compared to before the pandemic. DAOs would make it easier to work for an organization based anywhere in the world. Or you could contribute to a DAO alongside your full-time job, potentially getting a huge payout if the organization succeeds.
Now, during times of crisis is when we really see the human spirit shine. The future is bright, but only if we have the courage to light the path.
If we succeed, then in 2027 there will be more jobs than there are today, and the standard of living for the average person will be better than ever.
Hello, welcome to Incubator Weekly. Today we are joined by a new contributor who is Anthony here. Hello, Anthony, how are you?
Hi, how's it going?
Oh, I'm well, and how are you, Ryan?
Doing great. I loved that intro today. Nice job, Pete.
behind the scenes working that one.
Yes, good. We thought you might like it. Pete thought you might like it. And today why we build today is a topic that's specific to how does Dash work on the web as we know it today versus how we expect it should work or will work in the future. So Ryan, before we ask Anthony to give us some details about himself, will you first tell us what is this Web 2 versus Web 3 dichotomy that you have brought in Anthony to address?
Yeah, well, this will be a little bit of an intro to Anthony, and hopefully he can add some flavor to that. But because I brought him into the incubator, but he's already part of the crypto scene to some degree, and he'll tell you more about that. But Anthony spreads, he kind of pulls together the Web 2 and the Web 3 in a better
Web
way.
2.5 embodied.
Yeah, in a better way than almost anybody I know. Most people that are in crypto have no idea what's going on in traditional web development. And in fact, a lot of times the way that Web3 or crypto is doing things is kind of antithetical to Web2. And then conversely, a lot of people in Web2, a lot more people, in fact, don't really understand Web3. A lot of people, they'll probably say, we get it and we just decide that we don't like it. But I think a lot of people don't understand it. And Anthony is one of these guys that he understands the intricacies of both of these spheres and can navigate them in a really balanced way. And that's what I like about him. He's kind of similar to AJ in that sense, but they're very different people, obviously.
I'm a little more bought into crypto than AJ. I think AJ came around though eventually.
You are a little bit more bought in, you said?
Yeah, I think because I know AJ was very skeptical, and it was kind of only after I think Dash forced him to work on the project that he slowly started to understand the use case.
Yeah, strong-armed him with Dash incentives.
Yeah.
But yeah, so he's kind of more on the skeptical side, but that's what I like about both of you is that you're not really buying in 100% hook, line, and sinker on crypto, and I think that degree of distance is healthy and skepticism is healthy because it helps us improve what we're doing here. So
and hopefully communicate better between the two camps. That was always kind of my goal.
Exactly.
So Anthony, how is it that you came to become such a balanced individual? What's a bit of your background?
Yeah, so I have a kind of interesting background in how I got into all this, which I think helped contribute to this, which is that I first got into crypto and Web3 stuff before I knew anything about code at all. I got really interested in a lot of tech around the mid 2010s, and I was in the process of trying to figure out my life because I graduated with a music degree and didn't really have any good career prospects. I didn't really want to be a classroom teacher and kind of realized that I had to retrain to a certain extent. And I was really interested in AI, deep learning neural nets, all this ChatGPT stuff. I got really interested in that many years ago, and also blockchain crypto stuff. So the first time I ever heard the term Web3 was in 2017. It was quite a while ago. And I wanted to learn to code so I could do some of this stuff. But I ended up struggling to learn to code and also learn to do stuff in such a complicated new kind of ecosystem that I kind of I want to say I kind of gave up and learned web dev instead. I just kind of went the traditional boot camp route and learned how to make websites because it was just simpler to do at the time. But I always had that interest in crypto, and that never went away. And then fast forward after I'd already been working for a couple of years as a dev advocate, and I've been in the open source ecosystem, and I kind of knew what I was doing. I got an opportunity to work for a Web3 company during the craziest time, in 2022, when the whole ecosystem was at its total peak. So I worked for QuickNode for most of 2022, and they're a blockchain infrastructure company that hosts mostly smart contract type networks. So slightly different from Dash, but that's where I like really learned the tech and learned how to code smart contracts and deploy them. And that kind of helped solidify that. Like I understood all the principles back from when I first learned about the scene. And then I understood how the web worked because I'd just been a regular web developer. So then I got to actually work on the Web3 stuff. And at that point, I was also just really interested in this conversation that Ryan's brought up, which is like, why is there this division between Web 2 and Web 3 at all? Is it a useful division? Does it actually help or kind of hurt? And at this point, I think the term Web 3 is going to be kind of thrown out, because I think at this point it's kind of more derogatory than anything. For like, I'll see people like they'll be talking about AI and they'll be like, is this thing useless like Web 3? They'll say stuff like that, you know? So that kind of sucks. But I think it's because there's not a lot of good mainstream media coverage of these topics. And if anything, the mainstream media coverage is misleading. And so people get certain ideas, especially like things like the FTX thing blowing up. People kind of saw that as like representative of the whole industry instead of an example of like a specific bad actor that most of the industry actually would have told you not to have bought into in the first place. So
I was just going to say, like, it's funny how the Web 2 guys, a lot of them will say like, oh, Web 3 is toast now. You know, the FTXs and the all those scams are burned to the ground. But it's funny that it's like, no, that wasn't Web 3. In fact, that wasn't even that was like Finance 1.
That was traditional fraud.
That was traditional finance that did all that garbage.
That wasn't Web anything. That was just a classic bank run when there's nothing in the bank. That's old. That's an old thing.
Yeah. So anyway,
you want to talk about the origins of the terms. And the term Web 2 had originally been around in like the early 2000s to basically try and get this idea across of people were going to start interacting with the web by generating their own content from it. So it used to be there would be websites, and websites were just like academic papers and like databases and universities and random bloggers who are like eccentric people into weird subjects. And then at a certain point, we started getting these social networks and blogging platforms, and people realized that actually platforms were going to become a way for anyone to be a publisher of their own kind of content. And so that was kind of the Web 2 idea. And that's what led to this kind of sum total of what we now think of as like the internet, like the vast majority of the kind of social media companies you think of now, Twitter, Facebook, any of that kind of stuff. And then the term Web 3 was invented in 2014 by Gavin, what's his? I think Gavin Wood. Yeah, Gavin Wood. He's the one who created Ethereum with Vitalik. They're like, he was like one of the original people who kind of did that. And so the term Web 3 was meant to kind of riff on Web 2, and the idea being that not only now when we will be able to write to the internet, but we'll also be able to have ownership and permissions around the things we write to the internet, because that's what there isn't in Web 2, is that you don't actually own you don't own the content you're writing. Like the platform you're putting it on owns your writing. They can do whatever they want with it. That's where you get all these like banning issues and deplatforming and stuff like that. So the Web 3 idea was
Web 3. So Web 2, just to comment on that, Web 2, in my opinion, was a very big step down in terms of ownership, because it was
a step down ownership for usability, because most people weren't going to learn to actually host their own blog. So it was a compromise.
That was the big downfall, is nobody wants to host their own website. And so it's way easier to just way easier to just use one of these platforms, which are owned by, for the most part, VC-backed corporations. And that was fine in the beginning, but we're now seeing that was, kind of a huge mistake in terms of deplatforming, like you were saying, and just generally being in control of your content and your audience.
Mm-hmm.
So then, gentlemen, tell us, how does the content of this newest project in the incubator, which is being called Web Framework Integrations, how does it go about addressing some of these things you've been talking about?
Yeah, so it's a little bit of a shift of gears. It is very related, though, because I think a lot of the things that like Ethereum land and EVM smart contract platforms they're kind of, well, they're not doing away with Web 2, but Web 3 really relies on Web 2 because that's where the user interface is built. So if you want any kind of interaction with your user, which obviously you do in anything Web 2 and beyond, you need a user interface. And these user interfaces, they all have, there's a lot of frameworks, and I'll let Anthony talk to this, but there's an explosion of web frameworks that help you build these user interfaces. And people probably don't realize, unless you've really been following it closely, how big of an industry this is.
Yeah, and so it's all just JavaScript, good old JavaScript, because everyone was using JavaScript to write like the Web 2 applications. And then as they got increasingly complex, there was a need for more sophisticated tools to create these front ends with. So you started seeing the creation of things like React, Angular, Vue. Some of these were created by companies like Google and Facebook. Some were just created by individuals who were kind of scratching an itch. And now those have become the dominant way that like all web people basically make websites. Like when I did my boot camp, it was like a 6-month curriculum and we learned React. Like 90% of it was just learning React. And that's kind of what people will tell you when you're getting into the industry. They're like, you gotta learn JavaScript. And then if you want a job, you're gonna be best suited by learning React because that's where the most companies are building and where the most jobs are. But there's all these other frameworks now that are kind of competing with React. So if you want to be kind of welcoming to Web 2 devs, the best way to do that is by kind of meeting them wherever they are, which usually involves having some sort of example app or a starter that just shows how do I get like a boilerplate front end in this framework connected to whatever the back end is, which can be a smart contract or can be a network like Dash or whatever.
Yeah, whatever the back end is the key phrase there, because traditionally in Web 2, you're connecting to just a normal server that in a lot of cases is another platform that's hosting like a serverless function or something like that. And then the other part of the back end is the database where you're actually storing the data. And so Ethereum came along and said, we want a lot of computation. We want to kind of offload the back end to these smart contracts. So instead of running your functions, your back-end functions on a server, we will be your world computer. And that was the way that it was pitched originally. And so that's where the execution happened. But Anthony, correct me if I'm wrong here, but Ethereum, from my perspective, never really got the hosting of data down very well. In fact, it's very expensive to just store your data on the Ethereum network. So you
ended up with stopgaps where you had these layer 2s that would kind of offload computation, and then you'd have decentralized storage networks like IPFS or Filecoin. So you ended up kind of augmenting your smart contract with these other decentralized services where the data would actually live, and then everything gets like super complicated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's where Dash Platform comes in with, we are providing a service to host that data, just the data, and so instead of doing execution primarily, we're primarily focused on data storage, and we will need back-end functions and execution still in the Web 2 world. So that's another part of this integration is, Anthony mentioned some of the front-end frameworks, user interface frameworks like React, Vue, and Angular. And there are new ones as well, like Solid.js, Quick, and Svelte, things like that. And so like Anthony was saying also, we need to have example apps in all of these frameworks, but not just the front-end ones, but also the quote-unquote full stack ones where it's not just the user interface that the framework is doing. The framework also has a server component that then connects further to a back end. And so instead of React, you might look for something like Remix that adds the server side component as well, or something in the Solid.js land. You would have the Solid Start framework, which adds the back end component. But none of those really integrate deeply with databases. So each one of these frameworks will then have further integrations where it's like, okay, this is the solid start recipe plus
with a lot of combinations really quickly.
or plus this other database or plus this other database. And so the combinations of these things can explode. And so what we will want to do is we'll want to have example apps where the front end frameworks can connect directly to the Dash blockchain for data storage if you don't need any kind of backend, but you want some storage. But then also another one that I wanted to mention was for React, there's a framework called Next, and that adds the backend components. And so some integrating with that, but using the Dash platform for data storage would be something that community would be interested or might be interested. And that's what we want to do is say, hey, community, like Next.js community, here's your framework plus using Dash platform for data storage and or payments and or authentication. And so those three things actually is kind of my goal with this project is can we add Dash payments, authentication, and storage. In fact, the way that I think about it is SPA. You'll be familiar with that term SPA, Anthony, which typically means single page application.
Which is now a dirty word.
But I think that the industry, as it always does, might circle back to doing things. They always go back, now we're server rendering everything and now we're client rendering everything. And we'll probably find a balance at some point where people will start to look back and say, yeah, actually, I did like how the front end was rendering everything and there wasn't much going on in the back end. So I think Anthony hopefully will be able to kind of start us on that process at least because he's familiar. One of the things that you're good at is kind of looking at all of these communities and seeing what the pros and cons of all these different projects are, but just being aware of them all is a task in and of itself and kind of a full-time
and be able to kind of like rank order them as like, you got to start with React. And then usually from there you go to like Vue. And then it used to be then you go to Svelte, but now it's like there's always options that are kind of competing with it.
Yeah, and we can't forget Angular, right?
Yeah, it's true.
So speaking of all of these different development communities, what can either of you tell me about a sort of competitive analysis? Like which other cryptos, if any, are courting which of the communities we want to court? And how well or poorly are they doing that today?
It's a really good question. I don't know which ones are courting which, but I know that the vast majority will just kind of go with React by default. Like it's very much the clear front runner and Next.js as like the kind of React framework of choice. Because you have to like pick the framework and then the meta framework. So most people pick React right away, and then they pick Next as the kind of next layer on top of that. But I think it kind of depends on just where they're coming from. Like as Ryan was saying, a lot of Web3 people don't really have a lot of strong connections to Web2, so they're not really concerned about this like huge competitive landscape of slightly different frameworks that have like weird optimizations that might not really matter too much. They just want like a front end that's going to work, so they're going to go with just kind of the base option, which is React.
Yeah. So I think the way to start this is the first thing that I wanted to start with was just simply integrating payments, because you can do that into any framework. So instead of,
because you have a JavaScript SDK already.
Yes, exactly. And so
we
can integrate payments.
In theory, you can get to work with any JavaScript framework, and getting it to work with different ones requires doing different things. That's why usually then you'd like have a specific React SDK that would add like kind of one higher level step to it. But
so instead of
that far here, we just need to like show how to do it.
Yeah. So instead of having like an SDK, how you would expect it to, what you would expect to have if you were building a vanilla JS application, kind of bump that up to the next level where instead of just an SDK, you actually have a React component that does payments or receives payments or something like that. So yeah, those are the kinds of things that we're going to explore.
And Ryan, could I ask, so when you say the first thing you want to tackle is payments, are we talking about providing the kinds of things that could potentially tempt people away from what seems to be the current go-to of accepting Dash or really any crypto payments? But it's like, oh, like which service provider should I use? I should use nowpayments.io or whatever their domain is, or the coin payments. Is the reason that people use those services because we don't have like what you're talking about?
I think probably the main reason that people would reach for those services is that they want multiple coin support. And I can't blame them for that, because as an application developer, you want to support as many customers as possible. But it also, I think, might be a step, a little bit of a further step than most people might want to take. So integrating with coin payments, I don't know, actually. That's one of the things that I've wanted to do, is just kind of have a project that goes through each one of those payment processor integrations and sees what the process is, and develops that in a way that other people can look at and see, okay, if I wanted to use this payment provider, let's say BTC Pay Server integrated with Dash, how would I go about doing that? So that's something that I have been and still am kind of interested in. But I think this is a simpler approach that just says, okay, all you have to do is put this script tag in to your application and bam, you're off. And now you can make payments and receive payments in your application. But again, this is a kind of a big topic that many people have different ideas about, like what's the best user experience? Should I ask application developers to integrate with a web extension? Should I ask them to drop in a script tag? So we don't have all the answers for these yet, but that's part of the thing that we're going to explore and just see what works best. And I anticipate that this project is going to be kind of like a base starting point for several projects that will spin out of this, because it's a huge chunk of work to integrate with all of these platforms.
The Dash
and frameworks.
Skunks works now.
Yeah. So, I mean,
did he just say Skunks Works? He did. Oh, Anthony, I don't know if you knew that was a term that was thrown around actually by the founder of Dash some 6 years ago or something. But anyway, I like that you just said it.
Does that bring you back, Amanda?
I love just doing random projects that teach you things while doing it. Like, it's cool.
Yeah, it's a bit of a Skunks Work project. But yeah, it's a lot of work. So we're going to need, if you're listening to this or watching this, and you are interested in, I love Angular, I love Svelte, I love React, I love blah, blah, blah. I'm a Remix guy. We need your help. We can give you bounties for integrating Dash. Again, SPA, that stands for, in this case, storage, payments, and authentication. So those are the three things that I'm interested in utilizing Dash for in applications. And I think the easiest one is just the payments. So we can probably start with that.
Great. So for anybody interested in what Ryan has just said, Ryan's and Anthony's contact information are in the description of this video. And then the work card, the bounty card, reward card that gives more details about this project is also in the description section. And as we get closer to wrapping up, Anthony, I just was curious, and obviously no need to answer, but is this going to be your first time being paid directly in crypto for your development work?
I think so. Yeah, because when I worked at QuickNode, I think they gave you the option to take your payments in cryptocurrency, but I was just getting a regular paycheck. But yeah, I mean, I already own a bunch of crypto, so be good.
Yeah.
Well, that's good news.
Well, we hope that one of the nice things about getting paid in Dash is that you can also help us test using Dash in the real world. So
exactly. Which we did.
We did. Oh, yes, we did. Yeah. We met up recently in Salt Lake City. He was out here for one of these Web2 conferences. And so I was like, hey, let's meet up and have lunch. And so we found a place that accepts Dash through Dash Direct. And
it was a bit of a process.
I will have to say that it was a bit of a process. So we have some feedback to give to the people, including our own Dash core group. I think that the mobile app played a little bit of a part in some of the struggles, but
mobile apps are hard. Like that, and that's something I know absolutely nothing about. I've never worked on a mobile app at all, so I sympathize with the challenges there.
Yeah, but also just the choice to make the Dash Direct experience be a 2 application experience where you're switching between, you can start in either app now that the Dash merchants through Dash Direct are integrated into the Dash mobile wallet. So you could start there, but then you're flipping over to the other app, and then you're flipping from that app back to the payments app. It's a bit of I wonder if there's something that we could improve there. So just that might be further a different project altogether. But yeah, like integrating Dash into, we do have another project where we're building a wallet, and so maybe if we could have both the purchasing of the gift card and the payment coming from one app, it might be a better experience. But we'll see. I'm not sure if that's even possible with the way the Dash Direct is set up. We'll look into it.
So I have one final question. Anybody who is currently following Dash Incubator on Twitter may have seen that this past week we tweeted something about something I actually just discovered, which was that the general repository for Dash tools, which is what AJ has talked to us about frequently recently, is under an even larger umbrella called the Dash Hive. Mm-hmm. And that this Dash Hive is correct me if I'm wrong, a JavaScript development association based in Salt Lake City. And so given that you both have seen each other in Salt Lake City this past week, I just wanted to ask, is there something special going on in the area? Is this something that people who, are either maybe interested in willing to relocate or just, JavaScript freaks or whatever, like tell them like what's going on there that's special, if anything?
Well, the Dash Hive organization on GitHub was something that I created a long time ago. And I've since, so I think it was probably, I don't know, maybe even five or more years ago, I created that when I was just getting into Dash, and I wanted to do some work with other people in my area because I was hosting the Dash meetup, and so I created that organization, and I think I might have got funded for something a long time ago back then, and got it started, but it kind of just sat dormant for a while. But then when I got back into the Dash Incubator and I wanted to start doing when I was doing more work with the Dash Incubator, I wanted a place for my own section of the incubator where I could host like the projects that I was working on personally. And so that's kind of where I just brought it back and said, we'll just put this code base in this repo, just because I don't want it to get lost in the noise of all the other things going on in the incubator. So that's more or less where that came from. I don't know if, we could make it bigger or not, but, or maybe even at some point I might split off from the incubator and do the Dash Hive thing. I don't know. We'll see.
Anthony, what was your experience like in Salt Lake City this past week? Was it like standard dev stuff? Did you find that there was any sort of particular energy? I'm trying to understand for myself, if nothing else.
Yeah, well, I mean, when you go to a conference, like you're kind of just in that conference. So it was very kind of specific to that, which was Remix. And I was going for my job at Edgeo. So we were talking about kind of serverless functions and stuff like that. So Edgeo is one of these numerous platforms that does that. So we integrate with frameworks like Remix. So I was going there to just network with people from that ecosystem. And also we were kind of like media partners with them. We have our podcast, JavaScript Jam. So we were interviewing speakers and doing podcasts and stuff from there. So yeah, I mean, I find it interesting that and me and Ryan were talking about this when we were there, is that there's actually quite a large chunk of very visible, like public React developers and JavaScript developers in Salt Lake City. And yeah, it's like hard to kind of put your finger on exactly why, but I remember when I was first getting into this, people like Charles Maxwood and Ken C. Dodds and Tyler McGinnis, there's like very prominent kind of JavaScript people, were all like Mormons from Salt Lake City. And there was so that was something I always kind of had in the back of my mind. It's like, I should really check out Salt Lake City sometime.
The networking is strong here.
Yeah. Seems like
well, righteous. Well, shoot, if you ever end up here, Anthony, I know that I would be glad about that, and I'm sure a lot of other people would as well. So do either of you have any final comments before we say adieu?
Anthony, did you want to say something about Edgio, a little bit more about what you do there? Or
Yeah. So I'm a developer advocate. So I do kind of similar stuff for all the companies I work for and open source projects. And it's going to be similar to what I'll be doing for Dash, which is I build example apps and I write blog posts and I interview people for podcasts and I guest on other people's podcasts. And so just kind of like, I do all this kind of media to hopefully explain the tools and not just kind of like market them and shill them. So I'm very big on kind of treating this more like an education role than anything else. But Edgio is a deployment platform that you can kind of think of similar to something like a Cloudflare or Fastly, where it's like a very large network with global points of presence all over the world. And we also have a deployment platform that makes it really easy to deploy your JavaScript app. So if you've used something like a Netlify or a Vercel, you are used to just syncing your Git repo to this deployment platform, and then it takes that and pushes it up, and then you're there. So that's kind of the deal with Edgio. It has a little bit of a confusing history because it was a combination of 3 different companies that were all like 10 years old, and they combined and rebranded as Edgio like a year ago. So most pretty much no one has like ever heard of it, but we're like 4%. We host like 4% of the internet or some like absurd amount.
Well, that sounds very interesting. Until the point that I would like to get to with Dash platform, where we're actually hosting, where we're providing web server services, so you could actually deliver your website and potentially even a JavaScript runtime. That's kind of like what I want to see out of Dash platform. But until that point, it might make sense to try to integrate with Edgio. So we'll talk further about that. But yeah, thanks for coming on, bringing your expertise, and I look forward to watching. I think I asked you this before, and I, in my mind at least, I have an answer that you told me. I don't know if I just made it up or not, but I think that you said that you stream some of your work, which I love to see because I like to have all of our work as public as possible, so that other people can learn from the best. So are you going to be streaming some of this work that you're going to be doing for us?
Yeah, that's the plan, that I'll kind of stream as I'm building things out and writing documentation, creating the example apps. And that way I can kind of like, I'll be talking out kind of what I'm doing. So I'll be learning a lot about Dash as I'm going. So obviously I have all this expertise in JavaScript and I've worked with other Web3 stuff, but I've never used Dash at all. So I'll be learning all the kind of idiosyncrasies, the specific libraries and stuff. So that's always fun and creates like good content for other people who are kind of coming at it from a similar perspective, who may know a bunch of JavaScript, but have never worked with Dash before. So yeah, and I really love streaming in general. I have a Twitch channel that I do every now and then, and I just like live coding. I think it's super fun.
Nice. Very much looking forward to that. Did you want to stream that through your site or potentially through this channel right here?
We can or maybe co-stream it to both.
Nice. Okay. Well, there you have it, people. If you're listening to this, then you might be seeing Anthony streaming right now. Up until now, AJ has been the only one that has been bold enough to stream over this channel, but hopefully that's going.
I watched some of those like a year ago. He does so many of them and they go for so long that I can only watch so much of it at a certain point, but they're entertaining.
Yeah, and I have to watch him on 2 or 3x because he goes forever, but I do like it. So all right.
Yeah, it'll be nice to have some competition among the streamers. It'll be like red team versus blue team, Anthony versus AJ. Let's see who streams better. Very good.
Fortunately, they're very different focused people. Like AJ is very much a library backend. Like
We're almost the exact opposites in a lot of ways.
So it's very complementary. So that'll be good.
Yeah,
Perfect.
AJ is not a fan of React.
To say the least.
Well, I'm sure he doesn't make any shyness about expressing that. So maybe we'll hear some about that in the future.
Yep.
All right, we're going to close up here, everybody. Thank you for joining us today, Anthony. Talk to you next time, Ryan. Bye.
All right. Bye, folks.